I just started recording.
Awesome. Thank you, Kelly. We'll wait just a couple more minutes in case anybody else is joining in. I know I'm super excited about swag. I always get excited about silly things like that. T-shirts, bags, pens. While we're waiting, are all of you guys familiar with Screencastify? Have you used it once? Is anybody brand new to Screencastify? Feel free, you can either unmute your mics or if you want to add it in the chat, we can do it that way too.
I am brand new.
Okay. Yeah,
I used it quite a bit last year for online teaching.
Yeah,
it was one of my go-to things to use.
I love it. It's a great tool. I'm just getting my tabs open on another screen so I can kind of demo some things with you. Well, I'll go ahead and just get started. We've always got the recording going, so people can join again. Teresa, I'll send that link again. I think it only shows you the chat history from the time you joined, and I might have sent that before you were on, but no worries. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen. I feel so rusty doing this. It might get a little crazy because I'm going to be sharing my screen, but then I'm also going to be recording the screen that I'm sharing, so you can see the Screencastify options. You guys should be seeing the tech resources page right now. Does that look right?
Got it.
Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and the Screencastify it's an extension and it should be pushed out to all of your devices as long as you're signed in with your Google account because we have a district-wide license. If you don't see this up here, you probably don't see your staff resources either. On my account, I don't have staff resources because mine's set up a little bit differently. But don't forget, you can always click on your icon here and make sure your sync is on so that you can see all of the things that we push out to you. And this will be important because we have the paid version of Screencastify, so you get some additional features since we purchased this in the district. I'm just going to show you how I would use Screencastify, and then I'll kind of elaborate as we're going through here, different ways that you can use this with your students. Now, before we start, I always like to mention, if you look here on my screen, there's a lot of information that people can get about you just from the toolbars and the different things that you have open on your screen. So keep in mind, before you start recording, look at all of the tabs that you have open across the top. If I come in here and I open my email and I just grab an email from another person, it may show, once it's finishes loading, it will show like your inbox title. Sometimes it shows the subject line. If you have a Google chat message that pops up, some of that stuff will flash up here in your tab. So just be aware of the tabs that you have open. The other thing I like to point out is in your screen, I'm just going to mute everybody real quick if you're not muted so we don't have any feedback. Whoops. There we go. Your date and time also show up on your screen. I know this probably seems like a tiny thing, but I always point this out. Same thing I say with like Google Docs and when you're creating assignments in Google Classroom. If you can get away with it, don't put the date on things and don't include the date and time in your videos. It kind of like dates what you're doing. And a lot of the videos that you create, you'll be able to use for many years. And if you put the date on them, sometimes when people look at them, they're kind of like, oh, wow, she created that in 2017 and hasn't updated it since. I don't think that's a bad thing, but some people, it's just one more piece for them to be critical of. So just kind of keep that in mind. The other thing is, I think back to the pandemic, we were all literally working and living day by day. So if you're recording something, it might be 9 o'clock at night after your kids go to bed, you're recording something for the next day. And sometimes people don't always have the most forgiving attitude, or they don't kind of understand where we're coming from working that late. So just kind of take that whole thing out of there for them. So I'm going to go ahead and start recording. When you're ready to use Screencastify, you just come up here to this little orange Screencastify icon. It's the same one that's on the top of my shirt. And then you get some choices. And I really like this because Screencastify started out as a screen capture tool. So it's great to show students where to click and how to work through things. But you can also just record your webcam. So if you just want to record a video of yourself reaching out to your students, you can just use this. You don't have to have a separate tool. You don't have to use your phone. If you don't have, I'm trying to think of, some people might use like an iPad. If you don't have access to those kinds of tools, just use your webcam and it will record and save to your Google Drive for you. The other two choices, you can either record your entire desktop or you can just record a browser tab. So on my window here, if I choose the desktop, it's literally going to give me everything from corner to corner. I'll be able to flip back and forth between tabs and it will keep recording. But if I were to select this browser tab, let's say part of my video I'm demoing here on this page, and then I click over on my email tab, it's not going to record what shows up on my email tab. It's only going to record the tab that I have selected at this time. So I would say 9 times out of 10, I go in here and I just record my desktop. You can go in and switch between your microphones and your cameras. A lot of you won't do that just because you're just going to use the camera that comes with your computer and the microphone that's embedded. But it's nice to know that you have those to change around. But I don't know that a lot of us have played with some of these extra features. Screencastify, let me make sure my volume's up. It will do a countdown here in a second when I start it, and it'll say 3, 2, 1, and then it will start recording. You can make that longer if you'd like, all the way up to 10 seconds. I'm going to turn the drawing tools on because that's something I want to model with you today. And then another thing you might want to do is turn on your system audio. So let's say you're going to work through some Google Slides that you've created. You're going to show a YouTube video, and then you're going to come back to maybe your Google Classroom, all in your screen capture. If you turn this button on, it will capture the YouTube audio that comes from your computer. Instead of just capturing the sound that comes from your computer through your microphone, it will actually record the sound that's coming from your computer. So it will be much clearer for your viewers to see that. So I'm going to go ahead and record. And you can't see this on my screen, but it's asking me which screen do I want to choose. And so now we get to do this fun little piece here. You've got my webcam down here in the corner. Notice you can, I know it's kind of weird because my camera's over here, but I'm looking at this screen over here. You can make your webcam video larger. You can move it around. One of my favorite tips from Mr. Croy, you know how he does those district videos for us? When he creates the slides, he actually leaves a chunk in the bottom open so that his video has a place to go, kind of like designed on purpose that way. So if you want, you can move your video around. You can turn your webcam off. So maybe you want to put your webcam at the beginning of your video, in the middle, and you want to kind of explain the directions. Sorry, I keep highlighting that. Explain the directions for your project, and then you're done with the webcam. You can actually turn it off. And then let's say you record your video, you can toggle it back on. It just takes, whoops, let me put it back on the screen. It just takes a little bit of time to get comfortable with what you're recording. And then you also have some of these other choices down here on the toolbar. So if you would like your mouse to be emphasized so it's easier for students to see where you're clicking, if you click on that, it'll give you some choices. Right now, when I click, it's just going to put that circle around it. But you can do some other cool things. This focus, when you click, will zoom in. So it kind of like puts a grayscale on the rest of the screen. And then the fireworks one, that's kind of fun. It puts different little effects on the screen wherever you're clicking. Has anybody used those before?
I have a few times since they, sometime last year, you know, they were suddenly available. And so I tried just a few of them.
Cool. Yeah, they just added a lot of these features. A lot of them have not been around for very long. So in addition to your like emphasizing your mouse, I'm going to turn it back to just the plain circle so it's a little less distracting. You also can have a pen. So in your video, if you're like, hey, I really want you guys to click here on this spot, I'll be honest, I am not a great mouse drawer. I am a little rusty on all of that. You can come in here and you can highlight things that you want students to pay close attention to. You can change the color of your pen. You can come down here. They have an eraser that erases the whole screen at one time. There's also, let's just put a few more marks on here. If we go back to all of our choices, there's an eraser, so you can just erase part of it. I will say for those of you that are friendly with Smart Notebook, it does take a little bit of adjusting to get used to because Smart Notebook kind of erases things in chunks for you, and this one you have to be very specific. You can also put shapes around things. So let's just say, really want you to take a look at this video. That'll let you highlight it. And then there's fun stickers. So, you know, you've got your little emojis. We can put those all over the screen if you want to. So just some fun things that they've added. I would definitely say this takes some time to get used to, and you probably want to practice and plan ahead. I'm just doing this kind of on the fly and highlighting some different pieces just to demo, but you would really want to think through what your important parts are before you start. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. And what this is going to do, I can't remember which screen. Oh, good. It's showing up on the screen that I'm sharing with all of you. It's automatically going to open a tab with the video that you recorded. And the one thing that makes me absolutely crazy and throws me into a panic half the time, it mutes your video automatically. I'm not going to mute it, or I'm not going to unmute it because there will be lots of feedback. Wow, this video has all kinds of stuff going on. I'm just actually going to pause it here. But you do have sound. I promise you have sound. Another thing I would recommend is change the title up here. I'll show you all of my Screencastify recordings in a second. It automatically timestamps them, which is nice, but you have to go back and rewatch them if you can't remember what you were recording. So I might call this one Screencastify PL session. That for us when he creates. Oh gosh, that sound of your own voice. It's such a weird thing. On this screen, it's also important to notice, and this page here has continued to evolve throughout the years. You can automatically email this video. You can generate a QR code for it. You can push it right to Google Classroom. This is one of the biggest reasons we love Screencastify, is because we don't have to put our videos out there on a public place like YouTube. We can keep them in our own Google domain and still share them to Google Classroom. These two new features, I played with these a little bit today, and I have to say, one, I didn't even know they existed until I was refreshing today to do this afternoon. I didn't know that it would track viewers, and I haven't sent any of my videos directly from Screencastify to other people yet, so I'm not sure how this works, but it's supposed to count the number of views that you get. I don't know if you will get analytics, but that might be something cool for you all to report back to me. Let me know how that goes and see if it tells you which students or which users are watching it. I also tried to play with this interactive question thing earlier, but it kept crashing and it would not let me add questions. This, I think, Screencastify is probably trying to compete a little bit with Edpuzzle, which would be really cool to see what they come up with here if we could get down to one tool instead of two. But it wouldn't let me play with this today. So again, go in there and try that out and kind of report back and let me know what you think of these two features. Now, the export options have always been here. You can export the video in several different ways. You can send it out to YouTube. You can just download it on your computer, and they have a few different download options. But one thing I don't think a lot of people know exists is if you click this More options here, you can actually export your video as an MP3. And an MP3 is just an audio file. It's just the sound. So some people have asked me in the past, how can I create my own audio book? I'm thinking for those of you, especially over at the primary building, if you want to do a read aloud where your students could follow along with you, you could use Screencastify. Don't worry about what you look like on the webcam or what tab is recording, because if you're creating a read aloud, you're just worried about the audio. So you could create that video and then come in here and export it as an MP3, and now you just have a sound file, which I think is really cool. And then the Google Drive option down here is just a quick way for you to change your permissions if you want to open it up to more people, or if you want to copy that link so that you can email it. If you share it in Google Classroom with this option here, it's automatically going to adjust those permissions when it puts it in your Google Classroom. So no matter what it says here, if you use the Share to Classroom, it's going to edit for you. All right, any questions or thoughts so far? I'm going to click this open in editor just so it can load for a minute, but if you have questions, I would be happy to take them. All right, now the next part with Screencastify, there's a built-in editor that comes with this, and I would say I've used quite a few different editing softwares, and I like this one because it's simple and it only has the things that you need. So I've kind of dabbled a little bit with some of the Adobe and the fancier ones. There's a lot to those, and it can just be very, very overwhelming. So when you're working in the editor, down here at the bottom, you have a clip of your video. And if you notice up here, your preview will change. So if I hover over my video, I'm going to go kind of slow. It's showing you in real time what's happening with your video. Then up here at the top, here's your different toolbars. So right now, I'm not quite sure how zoomed in I am. So I'm just going to use this little slider over here on the right. There's my whole clip. Sometimes if you look down here, this is your audio. So I was talking. I must have stopped for a second here while this was loading. So if you want to go in and edit things, sometimes you need to zoom in a little bit closer. Let me show you what I'm talking about. If I want to go in here and I want to cut out this little pause right here, or maybe I want to cut out from this chunk to this chunk because I messed up, you can zoom in and it makes it easier to see where you stopped talking and where you were breathing. So it kind of cuts off at a natural point. So when you're recording, I talk to a lot of people and they're like, man, I had to do that 4 or 5 times until I got it right. My secret is I just keep recording. If I mess up, all I do is I completely stop talking on the video so that the audio goes down to 0. All of these little chunks here, this is where I stopped to breathe. If I zoom out and kind of look at the video as a whole, on the bigger picture, you can see I kind of have a pause here and I kind of have a pause here. So when I go back to edit my video, I'm going to zoom in on this chunk right here. And you might have to use your slider bar down here at the bottom to drag it across and find out, here we go. Here's this big chunk of a pause. So this kind of cues me where to start looking when I'm editing. So if I want to get rid of this, I click here. And my preferred way to do this is I cut the video. So it basically takes us, I had one long section. Now I'm going to zoom out and hopefully I don't make you too dizzy. Now I have 2 chunks. I have it took one video and it split it into 2. I'm going to zoom back in and find my spot. And then I also want to kind of cut it here. I should note, when I'm doing this, usually I have my speakers on and I'm kind of listening to my voice and where the natural pauses are. So I'm not turning the sound on right now because I think it'll have a lot of feedback, but don't be afraid to have your sound on when you're doing this. So now that I have the end point, I come up here and I cut it again. And now I have 3 chunks. I have the first part of the video, this middle chunk that I'm trying to get rid of, and then the end. And now what I can do is click on this middle chunk. It's not selecting the whole video. It's just that little tiny piece that I messed up. And I'm going to hit the backspace button, or you can come up here and click delete, and it gets rid of that chunk. So let me zoom out again so you can see the whole thing. Now I have those 2 chunks, and it's going to go from one part to another. And since there was a natural pause, like I wasn't speaking, it's not going to sound like I cut myself off. It should kind of flow naturally. So you've got these cut and crop tools. Cropping would be like at the beginning. If you're trying to, maybe you have different tabs open, or you're going from full screen to, or you're getting in and out of present mode, maybe on your slides, and you've got some navigation stuff at the front of your video you want to cut off. I'm thinking up here, maybe I was trying to figure out where my webcam was. And okay, I want to crop it until my webcam gets right to that point. You can come in here and use the crop tool, and that's going to let you pull from the beginning and the end. So the only thing I don't like about the crop tool is it doesn't let me, I use the cut tool to chunk things out of the middle, like inside pieces. The crop tool is good if you want to cut off the front or the back end. So it's going to take a minute to be chopping this apart. Another cool feature that you have in here, whoops, I'm just going to undo that so it's not. There we go. I mentioned earlier how you want to kind of be cognizant of your tabs that you have open and maybe the date and the time, those kinds of things. If you recorded something, or heaven forbid, a notification comes up and it pops up in the bottom right corner of your screen, you're like, oh, I was almost done. You can turn on this blur tool, which is really cool. It does take a little bit of time to get used to using it. So I'm just going to go ahead and click the blur tool, and I'm going to come up here and just blur my toolbar so they can't see what my bookmarks are or the other tabs that I have open. Now, the part that's hard to get used to, this little purple part down here, these are all layers. So right here, this part shows you your screen, the blue little bars shows you your audio, and this purple shows you the blur. But the blur is only on top of the video for this short chunk right here. So if I'm just taking my cursor and I'm kind of rolling it along, and it'll show you how the video will play. Watch my toolbars up here while I'm doing this. If your toolbar, okay, it's visible, visible. The video quality will be better when you finalize this. This is just kind of like a preview quality. So it looks a little blurry right now on my screen, but once we publish it, it won't be. So it's visible, visible. And then do you see how all of a sudden when I get into this purple section, it turns blurry? Well, you can click on this purple blur, and it's kind of hard to see. There's those little dots that turn into grab bars, and you can drag those, and I can actually apply that drag bar. Sorry, I tried to reset my screen. I can drag that bar throughout the whole clip. Now, I have mine chunked into sections, so I'm going to have to apply that to each section. So if I come over here, I can apply, sorry, my computer's thinking. There we go. Now I can apply my blur. I need to resize it again for each chunk. And then make sure it's on for the entire clip. And then when I publish my video, I don't have to worry about what was in my toolbars. They're not going to be able to see it. You can also add text, and it works a lot like the blur picture does, or the blur feature does. So if I come in here and I add my text, again, it's going to be by those sections. So I have like my first section, my middle section, my last section. All right, let's write some sample text. And I'm going to drag it down here so you can see it a little bit easier. Over here on the right, you get some choices. So you can make it larger. You can make it a different font. You can change the color if you want it to stand out a little bit more. And just like the blur tool, oops, let me tell it that I'm done. Just like the blur tool, my text is only going to appear for the section that it's applied to. So if I want to make it show on the screen longer, I just have to drag it. So if I'm hovering over what the preview will look like, boom, there goes my text, and it's going to apply all the way until I get here at the end, and then it's gone again. So if you really want to draw their attention to something, that's a cool way to do it. And then when you're done, you just have to export the file that you edited. I usually choose to export it to Screencastify. I like having a Screencastify folder in my Google Drive because it keeps everything in one place. And then usually what I do for this, if I usually put final in the title. That way I know that that was the one that I edited. Sometimes I mentioned, I'm gonna let that save for a second. This part does take a while, just depends on how long your video is. I mentioned up here, change that timestamp. Sometimes I'll put draft in this title up here if I know I'm gonna have to edit it, so that I have the final version over here. And all of this will save to your Google Drive. So if I open up my Google Drive, pardon the mess, might have, I've organized my Screencastify folder. I keep all of my technology apps in one folder up here. If you haven't moved it, it's just going to be hanging out with all of your other folders here. I moved mine over here. So my technology apps, I've got Screencastify, and if I open that folder, here's everything that I've recorded in my account in one easy place. All right, what questions do you all have for me? Those were the big things I wanted to highlight today. Let me just check and make sure there's nothing else hanging out in here. Yeah, that's good. All right, Kelly, can I have you, I don't know if it'll let me, will you stop recording? And then I think that's all that I have to share.